Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. I have to have an honest conversation about Georgia and about Kirby Smart, okay? So Georgia loses this game. They're on the wrong side of this beatdown. Final score, again, for people just joining us, it was 28-10. And remember, Georgia scored on the opening drive on a touchdown on a short field. They didn't find the end zone the rest of the game. As I said, under 250 yards of total offense, 59 yards rushing. And when I look at this game, listen, I think what do they say? There's the difference between the symptom and the disease. I always say two things can be true at the same time, even if they seemingly feel like they're different or that they counteract each other. And when I look at Georgia, this is the truth about Georgia. I don't believe that the reason they lost on Saturday was because of Carson Beck. But what I will say, Carson Beck has been an issue all year. I think Kirby Smart has had 2 or 3 chances to just see if somebody else on that roster can give him a little bit of firepower, a little bit of change of pace. And in a year where we've seen Quinn Ewers get benched at times for Arch Manning, we've seen other guys come in other places, I think Kirby Smart has made a tactical mistake not seeing what else is available at the quarterback position. Now, again, to be clear, I'm not blaming this loss solely on Carson Beck, okay? I'm not blaming it solely on Carson Beck because at the end of the day, why I actually picked Ole Miss to win this game was because I said Ole Miss has the number 2 run defense in all of college football, and the Georgia run offense has not really been able to get going all year. Now, part of it is injuries. Trevor Etienne was suspended that first game against Clemson. Then he comes back. He's been banged up, had a rib injury coming into this game. The O-line has kind of had to move guys around. They had the guard, the Ratledge, that came back in this game after the surgery. And so I'm not sitting here saying that it's all Carson Beck's fault, or excuse me, that the run game, that it's anyone's fault. But the truth was, this is the best run defense in the SEC. Georgia hasn't been able to run the ball all season long. And so I knew they would struggle. And I knew when you put the ball on Carson, you put the ball in Carson Beck's hands, you put the game on his shoulder, I'll be transparent. Simply don't trust him. Now, again, run game wasn't good. Wide receivers dropped too many passes. But I go back to what I said a minute ago. Carson Beck hasn't been good enough all year. And I really wonder why Kirby Smart has not made the commitment to try and at least see who else is on that bench. Can Gunnar Stockton, the backup, he's been in the program for a few years, can he give you some sort of juice, some sort of mojo, because this team desperately needed it on Saturday. And so when I look at this game, listen, it's not all Carson Beck's fault, but we've been saying it for weeks on this show. If you're new to this show, if you're just finding this show, if you've never heard me talk football before, we've been on the Carson Beck thing since basically like the Kentucky game, okay? We know the stats. Last year, 72% completion percentage, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Here's the thing, though. If you listen to this show, we know that Carson Beck has regressed, but it's not just that Carson Beck has regressed. It is that he has regressed significantly, and he has been his worst in Georgia's biggest game. This year, like I said, last year, 72% completion percentage, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. This year, 65% completion percentage, 17 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Here's the part where it becomes concerning, though. Carson Beck isn't just regressing. He has been his worst in Georgia's biggest games. Against Alabama, 27 of 50. We remember the great comeback, but 27 of 50, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, okay? Against Texas, it's hard. It's easy to forget this. Georgia's defense was so dominant. Carson Beck, 23 of 41. That's 56% completion percentage, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Against Florida, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 25 of 40. That's about 62%. And then 20 of 31, no touchdowns, 1 interception against Ole Miss. So in the 2 losses, 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. You add no touchdowns, 3 interceptions against Texas. You add 3 more interceptions against Florida. And I don't know why Kirby Smart has been afraid to pull the plug. Again, go through all the times when the offense needs a spark. And I go back really when I look at Georgia to last week against Florida. Listen, it's easy to forget now because Florida got boat raced by Texas. Florida was in control of the game against Georgia. They had the lead. DJ Lagway gets hurt, and Georgia really couldn't make a move because Carson Beck kept turning the ball over. And so when you look at that, you look back on that game, Kirby Smart had a moment in time where he could have pulled the plug on Carson Beck, where you saw him on the sideline screaming at Carson Beck, and he sat there and said, I wonder if this is the moment. Gave him one more chance. Carson Beck goes out, does enough to stay in the game, and Georgia wins. But again, it's the symptom versus the actual illness. The symptom is Carson Beck. The illness is the bigger picture, and it cost Georgia on Saturday. Now, the good news for Georgia, listen, said it a second ago with Ole Miss. All these crazy playoff scenarios, that's another conversation for another day, even just in the SEC. It's hard to figure out this, that, the other thing. And if you beat Tennessee this weekend, all of a sudden you're sitting at that point at 8-2. You're done with your SEC slate as Georgia will close the regular season with UMass and Georgia Tech both at home. Georgia Tech obviously coming off that big win against Miami. So if you beat Tennessee, you're in great shape. But the thing that I keep coming back to, Tennessee's a pretty good defense too. Tennessee's actually statistically a better across-the-board defense than Ole Miss is. And so if you couldn't move the ball against Ole Miss, I don't know how much success you'll have against Tennessee. Now, obviously, the big thing is with Tennessee, you got to remember, Nico is banged up. He may be hurt. We'll see as the week goes on. But it doesn't change the fact that this has been going sideways for a while. And I do blame Kirby Smart, who is otherwise lights out as a head coach. So we'll see what happens, but you got to be frustrated. And by the way, even if you get in the 12-team playoff, I listed it before. No touchdowns, 3 interceptions against Texas, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions against Bama, 3 interceptions against Florida. At some point, we have to acknowledge he's not doing the job, and I think it could cost Georgia the ultimate prize. Not saying he's the only problem. They got issues on the O-line. They got issues at wide receiver. They got issues in the run game. But it does start with Carson Beck. I saw Georgia fans very frustrated about that, and it's hard to blame them.